She didn't realize what she had until she had to live without it. And the moment she understood, minus the specific quiet, devastating moment when it became clear, minus you were already gone. Not dramatically, not with a scene or a confrontation or a door slammed shut. You just slowly, steadily stopped being as available as you used to be. You stopped reaching as far. You started building something that didn't center around her approval, and something in her minus, something she'd kept comfortable and undisturbed for a long time, minus began to ache in a way she hadn't expected. This is not a revenge story. This is not a manipulation strategy. This is the psychology of what actually happens inside a woman when she realizes minus too late or just in time, minus that she was treating gold like it was ordinary metal. You gave everything with, and somehow that became the problem. Here is the specific pain that brought you to this video. You were good to her, genuinely, consistently, without performance or agenda. Good. You showed up. You remembered things. You made effort when effort wasn't required and stayed when staying was hard. You loved her in the full, open, unguarded way that people are terrified to love because it leaves you so completely exposed. And somewhere in all of that goodness, minus somewhere in the reliability and the presence and the love that never made her earn it, minus you became something she stopped seeing clearly. Not because she was cruel, not because she didn't have a good heart, but because human beings are wired to stop noticing what never goes away. We adapt to warmth, we begin to expect light. We stop being grateful for the air until the room starts running out of it. You were the warmth, you were the light, you were the air, and she breathed you in so long without thinking about it that she forgot breathing was something she was choosing until the room changed. Until you changed. Until the oxygen shifted and something in her lungs remembered what it was like to not have enough. This video is about what happens in that moment minus, and every moment that comes after it. 1. The adaptation trap minus why consistent love becomes invisible. Start here because this is the psychological root of everything we're going to talk about. The human nervous system is built for novelty detection. It is wired to notice change minus what is new, what is different, what is unexpected, and by design, it stops actively registering what stays the same. This is called hedonic adaptation, and it operates in every area of life. The new apartment that delighted you becomes just where you live. The salary increase that felt transformative becomes the new baseline. The relationship that once felt electric becomes the background hum of daily life. This isn't a character flaw, it is neuroscience. And it is the reason that consistent, steady, reliable love, minus the very best kind of love, minus is paradoxically the most vulnerable to being taken for granted. When you were unpredictable, she felt you. Every interaction had emotional charge because the outcome was uncertain. But as you became trustworthy, minus as your love became something she could count on completely, minus her nervous system adapted to it, filed it under known, stopped generating the alert signal. She didn't stop valuing you consciously. She stopped feeling your value moment to moment. And that gap minus between what something is worth and how intensely we feel, that worth minus is where taking someone for granted lives. 2. The first sign, she is starting to miss you, minus she gets irritated by small things. This is counterintuitive. So stay with me. When a woman begins to register at some level that something with you has shifted, minus when your availability decreases or your energy redirects, minus one of the first emotional responses is not sadness. It is irritation. She is annoyed at small things, at things that shouldn't matter this much. And the irritation has a slightly confused quality to it because she can't quite locate what it is. Actually, about here is what is happening psychologically. Irritation is often the ego's first response to loss of control. She has been comfortable with a certain dynamic. She has been the person whose needs set the temperature of the relationship. And when that changes, minus when you stop being as immediately responsive, as endlessly available, as wholly centered on her, minus something in her registers the shift as threat before it registers it as loss. The irritation is her nervous system saying, something changed and I don't like it before her heart has caught up and understood something changed. And I am afraid of what that means. 3. The silence she didn't expect to notice. There comes a specific moment, minus, and women who have been through this can locate it almost precisely, minus when she reaches for the comfort of you and finds it slig. Teely further away than expected, not absent, just further. Maybe you didn't text back immediately the way you always did. Maybe you had plans that didn't involve her and didn't apologize for it. Maybe a conversation ended without you pursuing the resolution, the way you used to pursue every resolution. And in the gap where your usual availability would have been, there is something she didn't expect: silence. Not dramatic silence, ordinary silence. The kind that only becomes audible when you are used to constant sound. She sits in that silence and something stirs, a low-level discomfort she hasn't felt in this relationship before. Not because the silence is catastrophic minus, but because it is new, and new for a nervous system that had filed you under safe, and constant activates the alert system that adaptation had put to sleep. She starts paying attention to you again, noticing you in the way she used to notice you before she got comfortable enough to stop. 4. The comparison that starts playing without permission once the silence activates her attention. Something else begins to happen that she cannot fully control. Memory becomes more selective, more generous, more saturated. She starts remembering the specific texture of what it felt like to be fully chosen by you. The way you used to look at her, the small things you used to do that she'd stopped registering because they became expected. The version of the relationship that existed before she began treating its goodness as a given. And those memories minus playing now against the backdrop of a slightly changed present minus hit differently than they used to. This is the beginning of genuine missing, not missing an idea of you missing. You minus specifically, concretely, with sensory detail, the way you laughed, the way you made her feel seen. The particular quality of safety that she only now understands, she won't automatically find everywhere she looks. She is comparing the present minus, where your attention is less freely given, minus to a past where it was constant, and the comparison is not flattering, to the present. 5. She starts watching you differently. Something shifts in how she observes you. Before minus, when you were fully available, fully orbiting her minus, she didn't need to watch you because you were always already there. Visible, accessible, requiring no special attention to locate. But now, with the shift in your energy, you've become slightly unpredictable again. And the nervous system pays exquisite attention to what it cannot fully predict. She notices what you are doing when you are not doing it for her, who you are talking to, what you are building, what your life looks like when it is not arranged around her comfort, and what she sees minus a man who is capable, purposeful, self-contained. Interesting, without requiring her attention to be so minus creates something in her that the over-available version of you never could. She becomes curious about you. Not the safe, known, always there version of you. The person you are becoming when you stopped making her the center of gravity. Curiosity is the entry point of renewed desire, and she is becoming very, very curious. 6. The moment she reaches and isn't sure you'll reach back, this is the pivot point. The moment the missing becomes undeniable, she reaches for you, minus in whatever way she reaches, minus, and for the first time in a long time, the outcome is not certain. You might respond warmly. You might be busy. You might respond in a way that is caring, but doesn't drop everything the way you used to drop everything. And the uncertainty of that moment does something to her that all your certainty never could. It makes her feel the value of your attention in real time, not as something expected and therefore invisible, as something that could be present or absent minus and whose presence matters enormously. This is the moment she starts actively wanting you, not passively receiving you, wanting you, missing you before you've even left the room. Thinking about you in the particular way people think about things they're not sure they still have. The psychology here is consistent and almost universal. We desire what we are not certain of receiving. We actively want what we understand could be withheld. And you minus in becoming someone who is no longer endlessly available, minus have reminded her that your presence is something to be wanted, not assumed. 7. The guilt that comes when she finally sees clearly with the missing comes something harder, something she was probably not expecting. Guilt. Not performed guilt, not guilt designed to win you back. Real, honest, uncomfortable guilt. Minus the kind that arrives when you understand with sudden clarity how you treated something of real value. She starts to see the accumulated weight of the small dismissals, the times you tried to close the distance and she stayed comfortable where she was, the moments when your love was the most available thing in her world and she turned towards something easier or more exciting or less reliably hers. This guilt is not punishment, it is information. It is her heart finally doing the accounting that comfort had been putting off for too long. And the guilt is significant because guilt only appears where love exists. You don't feel guilty about mistreating things you don't care about. The fact that she is sitting in genuine guilt about how she treated you is itself a sign of how much you mattered minus and still matter 8. What she does with the missing depends entirely on you here is where this story has 2 very different possible endings, minus, and the difference between them lives in what you do next. She is missing you. She is hollow, feeling the guilt. She is looking at you differently, wanting you more consciously than she has in a long time. She may be reaching in ways she wasn't reaching before. And everything in you minus everything that was hurt by being taken for granted, minus may want to respond to that reaching with the fullness you used to give, to immediately return to the version of you that made her so comfortable that she stopped feeling your value. Not as punishment, not as strategy, but because the version of you that emerged when you stopped making her the center of everything, minus the version that is self-contained and purposeful and interesting in his own right minus, is the version she is actually reaching for. Now, if you immediately return to over-availability, you return to invisibility. The adaptation restarts, the missing stops, because the thing she was missing is back to being a constant. Stay in the version of yourself you've been growing into. Let her reach. Receive the reach. With warmth, minus you are. Not cold, you are not punishing minus, but receive it as the person you are now, not the person you were when she stopped seeing you. That version minus grounded, present, not desperate, not endlessly available. Minus is the one she fell in love with before habit made her forget she'd chosen him. Let her choose him again. Consciously this time. 9. The lesson that lives underneath all of this. Before we close, there is a truth that needs to be said for both people in this story, minus not just the one who was taken. For granted, taking someone for granted is almost never intentional. It is the natural consequence of comfort, of adaptation, of the human tendency to stop feeling what never changes. It happens in almost every long relationship at some point. It is not proof of bad character. It is proof of being human. What matters minus the thing that separates the relationships that survive this chapter from the ones that don't minus, is what both people do when the missing arrives. Whether the reaching that follows is met with openness, whether the clarity that guilt produces becomes the foundation for something more conscious than what existed before. Missing someone you took for granted can be the beginning of the most intentional love 2 people have ever shared. Or it can be a painful lesson learned too late. Which one it becomes is a choice made by both people. In the moments that come after the missing finally makes its voice heard. The most painful thing about being taken for granted is not the taking. It is the invisibility, being present and not seen, loving and not felt. Giving and having the giving becomes so expected that it disappears into the background of someone else's comfort. You deserve to be seen clearly the whole time. And now minus in the changed landscape of a relationship where you've stopped shrinking to fit someone else's comfort, minus she is beginning to see you. Maybe in time to rebuild something better. Maybe as the closing of one chapter and the honest beginning of another. Either way, the clarity she is gaining about your value is real, and your value minus the depth of what you offered. The quality of love you gave minus was never in question. You were never the problem, you were the answer she stopped paying attention to. Time to make sure that never happens again. Minus in this relationship or the next one. If this video names something you've been carrying, minus. If you recognize yourself in any part of this story, minus subscribe. Every week on this channel, we go deep into the psychology of love loss, value, and what it takes to build something real with someone who actually sees you. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be chosen consciously every single day. That is what this channel is about.